Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on another edition of the Jboy Show, where we're going to help you win the water cooler, take you behind the mask, behind the ball, however you like to get it, baseball, basketball, football, golf, anything that's pertaining and current, especially to the SEC. You know we've got you and got another great one coming today. But first, as usual, got to give a shout out to our partners at betonline.ag. Head over there today. They got the online casino. It's always open. Whether you want to take some props, parlays, golf, racing, any sport, they're going to have spreads on. They're going to have sharps. They're going to play it early, and it's a good time. That's betonline.ag. Head over there today and tell them that Jboy sent you. But a guest we've had on, one of my favorite guys to have on. We get him on periodically as we're racing toward the football season. Was a hell of a player for Auburn on the offensive line. Now does a great job for ESPN, the SEC network. You can find him doing analysis everywhere. And that's Mr. Cole Cubelic, as well as on Three Man Front, a great show on WJOX 94.5. They do a really good job there. Cole, as usual, man, it's an honor to have you on, buddy. I'm ready to talk some ball with you.
Absolutely. Good to be back with you. Appreciate you having me.
Definitely, man. I know you're a busy guy and you're kind of everywhere. So, I want to get straight to it, Cole. And I bring a bunch of guys on here and we preview who's going to finish here in the East, who's going to finish there in the West. But I kind of want to get into the minutia of a couple teams because there's some big storylines, especially pertaining to the portal. And from what you've seen, as much as we've all kept up with it, you look at a guy like Brandon Turnage going from Alabama to Georgia, Major Burns going to LSU. How crazy is it seeing Donovan Kaufman, we believe, is announcing for Auburn today, going from Vanderbilt to Auburn. And it's not just in football. How crazy is this whole transfer portal to you? I know we had the pandemic, but just in general, seeing it, man, it's just very interesting to see players not only transfer within Division I with no penalty, but interconference as well, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. It's changed the landscape of college football. You can flip your roster with a matter of 2 or 3 guys, and it doesn't have to happen in recruiting. I think it's a little bit easier to fill a void or a need, as we heard Nick Saban say a couple of weeks ago when I tweeted the video of him and just said, man, this dude warned you. And he said, a lot of our good players aren't going to leave. We think a lot of good players are going to want to come play for us when we have room and when we have a void. And he goes and gets a linebacker and he goes and gets a punter, and that's going to make that football team better, which is kind of scary to think about. But you got a guy that like Jake Spavital at Texas State who signed no high school recruits this year. He's just going to go through the portal. Now, he's not going to do that every year. Circumstance have a little bit to do with that, but there's a lot of different ways that you can build your roster, change your roster, and I think that's going to change divisions. That's going to change what we think about some of these teams. That's going to change the way some of these teams compete with their divisional opponents, with their teams in conference, non-conference, and it'll shape the college football playoff a little bit because the teams that were going to be competing for those spots, they don't need a ton of help. Yeah. But it definitely changes what your team is and can be. The thing that I wonder about, because it's every day, and we've gone from the word transfer being essentially you being blackballed from college football and we would never hear from you again to, okay, maybe that guy shows up somewhere else and does something in a lower division, to, all right, we'll wait. And then maybe a couple of years later, like a Joe Burrow, that guy ends up showing up and then all of a sudden he's a good player, to now it's instantaneous. And it used to be, well, either right after the season or right after spring ball, when positions had sort of been assigned or depth charts came out, guys were going to be gone. We got guys hitting the portal mid-season. Yeah. We got guys hitting the portal mid-spring practice. We got guys hitting the portal days before a bowl game. I mean, it's literally every single day. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And to me, it really brings up how you're going to build a team and team building, team chemistry, having guys be on the same page. What are things you can do? I mean, I think about Mike Norvell at Florida State. He's got 2 kids on his team that started at South Carolina on defense last year. He's got a former Auburn running back that played a lot, 2 guys that played on Mississippi State's defense a couple of years ago. And I'm sure I'm leaving a handful of them out. He's got a Notre Dame offensive lineman that's coming in there. How do those guys get on the same page? Can those guys get on the same page? Will there be legitimate team chemistry? What's it going to be like for guys like Henry To'oTo'o, who is an amazing human being, a wonderful individual, a highly intelligent football player, but he's going to walk into a place where these guys have been They've been hitting weight rooms. They've been doing they've been working out 7-on-7 practice. They've been in that uniform, in that facility, on that bus, in that hotel, on that field with each other for however many years. Does it just work? Or do you have to go a little bit above and beyond as a coach to try to help find a way to build that chemistry? That's a tough ask.
Yeah.
And your talent level may go up. Your depth may be better. And maybe an individual position is more talented than it was before. But is it always going to help your team?
Yeah.
Because I think a freshman comes in acting different with different expectations than a guy that's been playing college football for 3 years. But the flip side of that is he knows it. He knows the schedule. He knows how fast it is. He knows how physical it is. He knows the exact expectations of what it's going to be like. So you have advantages on that side. It's a really interesting topic because it can go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you talk about having trouble building culture because you don't have the same people there. I'm wondering if we're going to get to the point where if a head coach takes another job from Division I, if he just brings, 6 guys with him that are able to transfer so he can just, kind of like the Jags did in the draft. Well, we'll just take Trevor Lawrence. We'll take ETN. We'll get some guys that are used to each other. I wonder if we're going to start seeing that, especially if there's no penalty. And Cole, before we move on, do you think the transfer portal rule is going to be refined a little bit after this year due to the pandemic? Or do you think this is something that's going to be here to stay? Because obviously the more empowerment that the players get, we got NIL coming down the pipe, and I'm not even making a judgment on that the other way, but do you think there'll be some guardrails put in? We know the SEC's voting on the interconference rule, I believe, soon, and it's going to pass. But do you think this is here to stay? This is how it's going to be from here on out? Or do you think they're going to make some changes and put some guardrails in if it starts getting a little weird?
Yeah, first week of June, we'll hear from the SEC.
Yep.
And my understanding is that there are multiple proposals on the table. And I sort of wonder sometimes if the early success of Alabama has some other teams saying, okay, do we really want this? It would help us, but if it's going to help them more, maybe they change their mind. I don't know how that vote will go down. I think it should be, but I don't believe it will be. I would love to just see a one-time transfer rule that's been stated where you can go anywhere you want, anytime you want, but after that, you're going to have to serve some sort of a penalty. Because I read these stories about these kids that have gone one school, JUCO, another school, portal, another school. And it's if you're not going to change the amount of scholarships new scholarships that you can have annually, and you're not going to change the number of scholarships that you can have on your roster, if you can't take a 1-for-1, then I don't know how you can continue to allow this be a free for all. The problem there is all of these folks, whether it's pay for play, name, image, likeness, transfer, these people for this free enterprise and anything goes and poor players and, free workforce, those folks aren't going to stop at this. Just like we all think that name, image, likeness, they're going to start going away. It's not going to be the end of that. And it's never going to be enough. So they're going to keep pounding for more. They're always going to want more. So I find it very difficult to think that something like this, that you're going to be able to go back on it, because you're going to have so many people pushing against you that just say, that's not fair. That's not fair. And that's not right. And this is players' rights and players deserve this and that it's going to be very difficult to turn and go the opposite direction.
No, I mean, and again, I couldn't agree with you more, Cole. I'm not just saying that. And there needs to be after this year a penalty if you're going to transfer. I believe from Division I to Division I, not only just interconference, but like you said, once you open Pandora's box in the climate we're in today, especially, there probably isn't any closing it. So there's no telling where it's going to go. I just hope it doesn't change the game too much. It's already changing the game a little bit, but I just don't want to lose that purity that we all love in college sports, even though, again, there's some parts of it that aren't pure, but I think you know what I mean when it comes down to the difference between the NFL and college and that local feel. And, specifically, Cole, some teams that if you look, and again, Alabama, we know they're going to be able to fine tune their roster. They bring in Henry To'oTo'o, Jack Martin, who is a huge pickup. If outside of the Alabama family, if you don't realize how good of a punter Jack Martin is, he was the best in the country last year. I think he netted almost 46 yards a punt, which is absolutely ridiculous with no touchbacks. And with Alabama's defense, I think taking a step forward compared to last year, that's only going to help. But you look at a team like Auburn, Cole, that, you have holes on the offensive line, not a lot of tackles on the roster. If you could go out and get one, and again, you're beholden to what the portal has, but if you could go out and fix that hole, you add a wide receiver or two, with what they've added on defense, looking with Donovan Kaufman, with Tony Fair to kind of help with that Jeremiah Wright injury in the middle. Do you see some portal moves that could make Auburn, let's say, a little bit more of a contender this year in Brian Harsin's first year? Because if they don't add a tackle or two, or if they're not able to find at least a couple more bodies on that offensive line and add another receiver, I don't see how they're going to be able to put together multiple drives against teams with defenses that can rush the passer.
No, I think that's the first place that I would have gone would have been offensive line. And, I like some of what Brian Harsin has already done in that, he brings his offensive line coach from Boise in and makes his tight end coach. And then obviously hires a very good offensive line coach that had experience in the SEC. He keeps Kendall Simmons on staff. He brings his former OC at Boise to be an analyst on staff. He obviously goes and gets a quarterback developer in Mike Bobo. He has developed quarterbacks himself. So the quarterback offensive line brain trust on that staff is there to help develop the two positions that have needed developing for the last couple of years, more so than any position on that field. I think wide receiver would also be close to that. And I think it's one that they just flat out need some experience. I think you have some young players who are capable. You talked to that coaching staff last year about Xavier Capers, and they'll tell you that they like a lot what they see. They'll tell you that the young core they thought was going to be pretty good and be guys that could help them, but they just don't have a ton of experience. I mean, I think the leading returning wide receiver has 7 catches and 1 touchdown. So that's not a ton of balls being caught in SEC competition. You're going to need someone who just understands how to be a Southeastern Conference wide receiver or just a Power 5 wide receiver. So experience there, I think, would be big. Offensive line is a must-have. We know what it's been the last few years. You don't bring in a guy from UMass and he ends up being your best offensive lineman for 2 years. You don't bring in a guy from Akron and he ends up being your best offensive lineman. Not in the Southeastern Conference. It can't happen. If you want to get reps and depth and it helps you, and a guy who's a plug and play for a year that gets you through, a little bit of a depth concern, that's fine. If you have a situation like the kid they took from Jacksonville State as a backup center, Casey Dunn, who came in and did some nice things for you when you had to move somebody and he helped fill the void late in the year, that's great. But to have guys from those schools come in and be your best lineman, period, across the board, it literally cannot happen. But I think because of that lack of talent and because it hadn't been developed, you need to go get a guy or two. And I don't really care if it's tackle, guard, center. You just need guys. They need bodies.
That's true.
And I've said for a long time, one of the biggest issues with the Auburn offensive line is not the first team, it's the second team. Is when one of the first team guys does not play the way that he needs to, there's nobody to turn to. There's nobody to turn around and say, okay, put second string guy in. We're just going with him. I'm tired of seeing this other kid whiff or miss blocks or not play to the potential. So that is a big problem. And that's why depth is important. People think it's just injuries. It's not. You need to have somebody else that you can go to, and you need flexibility with guys at the same time. And I think quarterback. I mean, I think depth at the quarterback position is key. It could be to get you through 2 plays, 2 series, 2 games. But you're going to need somebody who can handle it. And we didn't hear a lot of great things about Grant Lloyd coming out of spring. And you're very young after that, probably not ready after that. And that's from a developmental and an age standpoint. So I would not be surprised to see a veteran quarterback who could maybe push Bo Nix a little bit for the starting job, but most likely knows he's not going to end up getting it. But then could be someone on that roster that if you needed to turn it over to him because of whatever reason, he's going to be able to help out and be some sort of a stopgap. Depending on how long it was, we wouldn't know, but a guy that you knew you could rely on and then maybe push Bo Nix a little bit in the process.
No, and Cole, it's sometimes looking over your shoulder isn't a bad thing. It can be a motivating factor. And it's a great point with Bo Nix. We talked about that many times on the show, and we actually put out a prediction. And from what I'm hearing, I think TJ Finley has a good chance to end up at Auburn, which that'd be a pretty interesting mix there, and would be a guy that would push Bo, kind of like you said. But speaking about pushing, if you're trying to push, whether it's your child, a friend, or you're an athlete, you want to get looked at by college scouts, recruiters, you need to download the Dynasty U app. It's on iOS. It's the Google Play Store. It's like a LinkedIn for high school players and coaches, athletes, everything. If you're trying to get exposure, it is the best app to get it. It's Dynasty U. It's free. You can go download it. We all know how much technology has influenced recruiting. You look at Huddle, many different apparatuses. This one is the best one. You need to go to Dynasty U. You need to download it from the iOS and the Google Play Store. It's great stuff and it's free. You need to jump in while it's free because as I say, the more popular it gets, it's not going to be free for long. It's really easy to navigate and they're really trustworthy people that work there. So download this, the Dynasty U app. That's on the Google Play Store and iOS. We're here with Cole Cubelic, co-host of Three Man Front on WJOX. You can find him on ESPN and the SEC Network. Does a great job analyzing what's going on in the college football world and beyond. We talked some basketball on here before. Cole can really do it. He's dual threat, man. But, Cole, I do want to shift. A team I've talked about a lot. They're my surprise team in the East, and I thought you had a great kind of dissection of them when we were talking about some previews before spring, and that's Kentucky. And I look at their schedule. I look at them in Missouri. I'm a firm believer that Florida's going to take a step back. I think they lost a lot. I do think Emory Jones is a little more of the Dan Mullen flavor at quarterback, but I do see them taking a step back defensively. I don't know if they've been able to replace the deficiencies that they've lost on a defense that was even bad last year. You look at Marco Wilson, but do you think there's a chance that you see a Kentucky or a Missouri finishing underneath Georgia in the East? Because I think, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me, Georgia seems like a pretty heavy favorite there in the Eastern Division.
Yeah, I would probably lean a little bit more Kentucky than Missouri. I love what Drink's doing there. I'm a big fan of Connor Baselick. The arm talent is out of this world, and I think that he'll have a better understanding of just how to manage that offense and a better understanding of just how that offense is supposed to run a little bit this year. Don't know if he has enough around him right now. Losing Nick Bolton on that defense, it's going to hurt, because I thought you could make the case that he was the best defensive player in college football last year. He wasn't on a great football team, and not a lot of people were talking about him. But if you saw how he impacted games via film when he was playing, it was on par with anybody else in the nation. He might not have the measurables or the combine results, but the dude made plays all the time and made big plays. I love this Kentucky team. I really do. And I'm an Eddie Grand fan, and I like what Eddie did the last few years. But for Coach Stoops to want to go a different direction and try to open things up to the air a little bit more was understandable. You bring a little bit of NFL prowess in to be able to do that. So a lot's going to come down to quarterback. Bo Allen, Joey Gatewood will compete. I personally think it's going to be Bo Allen. Now, I was standing on the sideline for the Kentucky-Georgia game last year when Joey Gatewood was inserted late, and for whatever reason, literally could not throw the ball past the line of scrimmage. Would not get the ball out of his hand. So I might be a little bit tainted as to what my opinion is on him going into this season. I know he's got a ton of talent. And if you're going to keep some of the Q runs, obviously he's going to benefit you there. But I think I heard the way that staff talked about Bo Allen last year. I've seen him a little bit in practice. I've seen him get some playing time. I think he has the arm talent, the arm ability, and I just think he's a different kind of quarterback. Chris Rodriguez is the most underrated running back maybe in all of college football, 100%. Definitely in the SEC. The offensive line is going to be great. Darren Kennard is, I think, the best tackle returning in the SEC. If Kenyon Green bumps the tackle, you might be able to make that argument. I think Kenyon's the best offensive lineman coming back, but Kennard is a beast. Dotson's played a lot. Fortner's played a lot. That offensive line's got a ton of experience, and you finally might have some wide receivers. That's been the problem at Kentucky because Lynn Bowden had to go to quarterback, so he couldn't be your big play wide receiver. And they've had the run game, they've had the O-line, they've had the backs, they figured it out at quarterback, but they haven't had anybody who could help stretch the field. Well, now you got a couple transfers coming in that might be able to help you do that. If those two can just be B+, A-, more than serviceable, a little bit explosive, this offense will be very different. And I think they'll be very difficult to defend. Majority of the front seven's back. Yeah. I mean, that D-line should be tough, physical, hard to handle. I'm excited to watch it. And Brad White is one of the more underrated coordinators in college football. He has done excellent work with that Kentucky defense the last few years. Yes, you lose a couple of big-time players. Kelvin Joseph ended up being pretty good for the majority of the season, struggled early against Auburn, had some penalty issues after the first third of the season. He got it under control. And Jamin Davis was good for them, but they didn't really – I mean, Brad would admit we had to use him in ways that we probably shouldn't. He had to do a lot for them. So I don't know if it's as big of a loss. I think this got a chance to be a really good Kentucky football team. The schedule's not that bad, and would not be surprised at all if they finish second to Georgia in the East.
Yeah, and I mean, they're tough as hell. I love the identity that Mark Stoops has put in over there. I mean, not only do they return Rodriguez, Josh Ali as well on the outside. So you look at that passing game, there are some answers there. And then just seeing them throw the ball forward is going to be interesting this year. It's going to add another dynamic piece of that offense. But Cole, as we're winding down, man, just want to ask you about the West real quick. You can't bet against Saban with what they've done. I mean, you see the way they reload. I mean, it's a machine now. You can really never count on them not being very good or not being elite. At least that's the way it's looked in the past. May take a few games to get their feet wet up front with some of the new personnel, the way they've recruited. But, my question for you outside of Alabama, it's kind of a mix in the middle. You look at LSU, you look at Texas A&M, you look at Auburn, you look at a team like Ole Miss, Arkansas, trying to get some more momentum added to that roster. Still don't think they're there. Give me two teams outside of Alabama in the West, Cole, that you think are going to be pretty dominant. I've got it Alabama, LSU, A&M, Auburn, Ole Miss right underneath that. Are there two teams in the West outside of Alabama you're really looking at to make a move this year, regardless of what they did in the past?
I don't know. You could say A&M make a move because they obviously were right there with Alabama last year. I don't think they take a big step back. Quarterback is obviously the big question. Haynes King brings a little more mobility. Zach Calzada is your big arm pocket passer that has decent mobility. The good news for whoever it is, they're going to have a good offensive line. If Kenyon Green stays at guard or moves to tackle, Layden Robinson will be there at right guard. He came in against South Carolina last year and was utterly dominant. And I'm not really sure how they kept him out of the lineup the rest of the season. And now it's not just CJ Spiller. I mean, you got A-Chain who you can kind of move around and do some different things with. You got Anaya Smith that you can move around, do some different things with. You have a really nice tight end room. We know about Weidermeyer. We've been waiting on Baylor Cup. I think we get to see him this year. Somebody who has good speed, good size, could help stretch the field a little bit. My question on offense is not so much quarterback as it is wide receiver. Is it going to be Damon Demas, who ends up being a guy who can sort of help take the top off or be the eraser for a quarterback who might have some issues at times and be your big play threat? They've got to have someone step up there because you can have everything else, but we've seen what college football is turning into. You've got to have a guy who can catch balls and create explosives on the outside. And defensively, I mean, they should be on par with anybody else in the league. They basically lose two of their top 22 on defense. And they're going to have the majority of that D-line back. Bobby Brown was solid, but I think they're going to be fine inside. DeMarvin Leal is going to be a first-round pick. We've been waiting on Michael Clemens for a couple of years. If he gets out there and is healthy, he's kind of your prototypical 4-3 defensive end, 6'6", 6'7", 260 pounds, 270 pounds. He could be a different body type that can help you do different things. And to be honest with you, I think they have a mega coordinator on that side of the ball. And probably doesn't get a ton of credit. We heard his name floated for a couple of jobs this past off season. Not surprised that he didn't take any of them. But I mean, you got a guy in Coach Elko that has done an amazing job. And Jimbo is changing the culture. Jimbo is putting the emphasis on the line of scrimmage. He's going to play with bonus bigs, tight ends, H-backs, fullbacks. And he knows on both sides of the ball, you better win up front if you're going to win championships. And he's getting there. It's getting close. I think LSU is a really interesting team because I think – so I'll start with this with LSU. They might have the best player in college football, and when anybody talks about LSU, they just don't mention him. And, Derek Stingley could easily be the best player in college football this year. Not the best corner. He might be the best player in college football. And you're going to have Ali Gay up front. You're going to have Ojulari up front. You got a couple of interior defensive linemen that decided to come back, and Neil Farrell and Glenn Logan. I'm talking big bodies who have played meaningful SEC football. Linebacker, Damone Clark, I think, is going to be the next in line. I think he'll be fine. Now you get a safety transfer from Georgia that can help you out on the back end. And then Cordell Flot's played nickel. He's played corner. He's going to help you out. Eli Ricks is a guy that's going to be able to help you out at corner. They got dudes on defense. It's the only way really I know how to say it. They've got dudes. Ed Ingram will be one of the best guards in the league. You have a right tackle in Austin Deculus that feels like he's been there for 11 years. He might not be an elite player, but he's got a ton of experience. Liam Eichelberg is going to be, or Liam Shanahan's be back at center. The Harvard transfer did some nice things for him last year. You got two starting quarterbacks is the way that I see it. And whether it's Miles Brennan or Max Johnson, it wouldn't bother me either way. I think Max wins it because I think he has a little bit higher ceiling, a little bit more talent just overall. And we know about the genetics, the bloodlines, the competition. Keyshawn Boutte, I saw another wide receiver list today. I think it was like the top, 25 receivers coming back, and he's not on the list. Well, Keyshawn Boutte's got more receiving yards in a single SEC game than anybody in the history of this league. Any of them, ever. It was against the Ole Miss defense last year, but still, that kid can play. I think Dre Jenkins can play. They love Coy Moore. Again, there's dudes on offense. And running back, I'm not as confident on, not as high on, but I wasn't super high on it before 19, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up being a first-round pick.
Yeah.
So they got guys everywhere. And I think they will be more competent and more capable in how they manage the defense from a coaching perspective this year. And we know what the offense is going to go back to. And the thing that was missing last year is, yes, a lot of it was similar. A lot of it was close to the same. But the thing that was missing, in my opinion, last year was all before the snap. There was nothing after the snap, but it was the pre-snap motion and shifts to find the matchups that would benefit their elite players better that were just gone last year. That'll come back, and that'll be a part of this offense. And I think I think LSU takes the biggest leap of any team in the SEC, because I think last year was a bit of an anomaly. There's too much talent for that team not to be a real player in this conference.
Yeah, and I think Ed Orgeron, he's a heck of a motivator. And obviously this whole offseason, they're going to be talking about the disappointment last year. And I think they do better as an outsider. I actually got them at A&M at 5-3 in the league. They play the last week at LSU. I got LSU winning that game to firm that second spot in there. But it should be really interesting to follow them. I'm amazed they're only a 1.5 point favorite. I believe it opened up at UCLA, kind of tricking me a little bit. We'll dive into that later. But Cole, great stuff, man. One of my favorite guys to have on here. Every time he talks, I shut up and listen. The guy knows a ton of ball. That's why we bring him back. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media, my friend. And once again, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's at Cole Cubelic, Colecubelic, and three-man fronts 10-2 on jocksfm.com.
Yep, and it's great stuff, man. Cole, thanks so much, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Anytime. Thanks you guys for joining us as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Grab some merch at thejboyshow.com. It's been another Jboy Show episode with Cole Cubelic, and we're gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blaine Crain and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com, for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with the Jboy Show.